that are trying to incubate and grow businesses with a few ideas that can help you continue to take steps forward while we wait for the world to come back to normal. So what I really hope you can get out of this today is understand that structure is not a curse word, and how structured processes can help you grow faster. And a few tips and tidbits on preparing and raising money, and just some additional ideas on getting revenue going faster and other resources you can draw from. I'll use my personal planning system that I've used myself and in my companies and with several other companies, called the Playbook, as the talking points. But I think the key things I'm going to talk about here, I'm going to skip through a lot of it, but really emphasize generating revenue, preparing for fundraising, and as you prepare to bring on team members as the time becomes appropriate for that. So who am I? You know, I think I grew up in Kentucky, the land of 5 million people and 4 last names. So suffice it to say, I have a lot of cousins. I've been in Nashville for almost 35 years. And what's relevant today is that I went from being a CPA to a chief operating officer running physician clinics to CEO of 3 organizations. I've executed turnarounds. I've grown companies from scratch to a successful exit. So I've had a lot of good, I think, background that when you're talking the early stage and growth company environment, through the School of Hard Knocks, I've learned a few good painful lessons that I hope I can impart to people. Probably what I was most known for here in Nashville is a company called Entrada that I took over in the fall of 2010 when we had about $100,000 in annual revenue, and we grew it to over a $13 million run rate when we sold it in 2017. During that time, we got a couple patents for how we were moving data around on smartphones, and won quite a few regional and national Best Places to Work awards. I think we moved up in Modern Healthcare's top 20 places to work in the U.S. at one point in time. So healthcare has been my focus the last 20 years, but I do have a variety of industries I've worked in and worked with over the time. So enough about that. Process and structure are not negative words. Can't say that enough. A lot of times we think if we get too structured that it stifles creativity, but the exact opposite is true. If you're really getting good structure around you, it frees up more time to be creative and grow faster, because you're not chasing your tail. You pivot on things quicker. You adjust in stream quicker. Cash is preserved more. You get the idea. And so I'm very big on that. Ultimately, that's what it's all about. Can we grow our revenue faster? Can we raise our money faster? And can we steadily advance to our end game, whatever that is for you? For most companies, that's ultimately to being acquired. So my process is called the Playbook. It has 7 steps to it, and I'll go over them briefly here, and then we'll go in a little more detail on them. I'm only going to emphasize 3 today, but it's focus, which is what should you be doing? Plan, who should be doing it? Score, how well are you doing it? Process, how do you go about doing it? Part 1. Culture, how do you go about doing it? Part 2. Skip back to communication. How do you tell people what you're doing? And finally, mindset. What are you thinking about what you're doing? When you boil all them down and you get it into a seamless system, things happen faster. So focus is one of the 3 I want to emphasize more. And that has 3 components to it. As a company, defining your core purpose, identify your competitive marketing niche, or what I also like to call your brand promise, which is the main thing I want to talk about today. And then your key overall strategic and tactical goals that's driven from your brand promise. When you get to core purpose, this can be overthought. Jim Collins has some great resources in his books. Most people have heard of Built to Last and Good to Great. He's got several others. But I think there's 2 simple exercises you can do that can nail this down fairly quickly. Get your small core team together. In some cases, it could be you and maybe even just one other. Talk about why you're doing what you're doing. Why are you starting this endeavor? Why are you growing this company? branch it out to other key people to refine, and then roll it out to the masses. That exercise can go fairly quick. If you need a little help generating thinking, this simple little process called the 5 why technique, I've seen it work so many times it's almost scary because it sounds so simple. You just ask yourself, why am I doing what I'm doing? Why am I taking this time? Why am I putting this company together? And then once you drill that down and think you've got it, ask yourself why, but why again. And after going through that 3 or 4 times, you'll get to the core. Now, where I want to spend most of my time here is your competitive marketing niche. And I like to use the hedgehog concept, which is really you're trying to identify what are you passionate about? What drives your economic engine? Who are the key buyers? Who are the key people who need what you have? And what can you be the best in the world at? Now, that sounds so dramatic. Another way of looking at it is what are we excellent at? Where those 3 meet, where those 3 intersect is your brand promise. Most of us, we feel pressure to grow revenue and we don't want to miss out on anything. So we tend to be marketing too many things to too many people, and it can get really too broad, and we can have our focus diverted in multiple directions. You can grow revenue a lot faster when you really get it nailed down to one lane, especially initially with one key thing to one audience. And I'll give you an example of that with Entrada. Our passion was improving healthcare efficiencies and outcomes. We were very much improvement oriented. Our economic engine were healthcare providers, not the hospital operators, not the nurses, not the administrators, but the actual providers and doctors who deliver care. What we were excellent at was integrating with health IT solutions, in particular, electronic health record companies. And that became our brand promise, caregiver productivity with tight clinical integration. Now, when we started off, I mentioned I came in the fall of 2010. We had 4 small physician practice clients, and we started rolling the company out. And we had people telling us you need to sell into the hospitals. You need to sell into ambulatory surgery centers. You need to keep selling into clinics. Next thing you know, we're building out a marketing slick for 3 different enterprises. We're talking about product development and trying to prioritize what would meet needs in all 3. But we were an app that sat in the doctor's pocket that helped them engage with their clinical system in the course of their patient engagement and get their work done a lot faster. The workflow in a hospital is radically different from a clinic, and is also in the surgery centers and clinics and hospitals are all 3 different. Well, once I finally blew the whistle on that after a few months to time out, we're canning 2 of the 3, we're going all in on clinics. When we did that, it clarified for us who we were marketing to. It clarified which electronic health record companies we wanted to approach to be our initial partners. It clarified priorities on building out features in our app. You get the idea. When you can more narrowly define an audience still big enough to have good growth with, but where you can get that brand promise very tightly articulated, you're going to grow a lot faster. Okay, because that's what it's about, revenue. Now, here's a few other thoughts around those lines. Quick sip. Almost without fail, any industry you go into, you're going to have larger, more established competitors that have been around, that could outspin you if they wanted to, that have a lot of brand recognition. But they can be out-thought and out-innovated, because a lot of times you're competing against one product out of many they've grown and developed, and they're not trying to do any new enhancements to it. They're just selling what they've always had. In many cases, it's written or built in older platforms that's harder to change and innovate from. While you're thinking through that, think through what are the emerging trends? What are things that are changing in the industry that can matter to me? What's going to come out of COVID-19? From a distribution standpoint or manufacturing standpoint, we know that people are going to start sourcing more locally and not too concentrated in one area, so that they don't get totally shut down like a lot of people are doing now, where their supply channels have ceased doing business for a period of time. We know that in the healthcare setting, that telemedicine and remote delivery of care is going to take off like crazy now. And I believe that risk-based, value-based contracting is what they call in healthcare is going to explode now, because now we've got all these, the emphasis on the kind of tools where you can monitor patients remotely more. What we had at Entrada was our key emerging trend was in February of 2009, the federal government passed the HITECH Act that put $30 billion aside and mandated in incentives and mandated that every hospital and every physician office in the U.S. had to go on a certified electronic health record system within the next 2.5 years. So there was this mass jamming them in, and they weren't very easy to work with. The doctors were just collapsing under the stress. And that's why that tight clinical integration we took was our way to grow fast and accelerated pace. Also, so you've got, think about ways you can out-innovate your larger established competitors where maybe their product doesn't quite meet a market need. Look at trends that are coming up that you can take advantage of. Look at key partners that can help you hit that target audience, and you can do things together. And ultimately, when all that is boiled down, you got your brand promise, you got all these factors. I want you to find your rocket ship. I'm going to work on that name, but it's your path to quick and sustained revenue growth. And what I'm talking about that is, what can you bring to market that will hit on a nerve to the point that you can grow at triple digits for at least 3 years at an acceptable margin and establish yourself with a good foundation. One other way to look at this is 90% of the fuel in a rocket ship is burned up in the first 30 minutes to get out of Earth's gravitational pull. But once you're out of that pull, you just coast along. What gets you out of Earth's gravity? And those are some tools I would say to get there. So once you've got your purpose, your brand promise, then you set your goals. I like for people to think from a 3-year perspective with a heavy emphasis on the upcoming year. Year one of that, the year that you're rolling into, everything has to be broken down by quarter. You need to be working from quarterly perspective. You should always be thinking along the lines of revenue, customer and partner diversification, and product development if you sell a product, or service line development if you sell services. But that doesn't mean they all have to be done at once. Rome was not built in a day. So maybe in year one, something like customer diversification may not be important. But by keeping a 3-year focus, you'll know when's the right time to focus on that. Okay, how does this help you in preparing for fundraising? I applaud anybody who has the courage to take on building a company from nothing. It is incredibly courageous. It's hard work, and I just admire your gumption in doing that. Now, when you layer that on with the fact that you also decide to either raise money or sell your company, you just committed to a second full-time job in addition to your busy life outside of work. It's really hard to properly spend the time thinking ahead and doing that well when you're also caught up in the day-to-day of running and growing the business. And so once you get that brand promise nailed down, once you get that focus sharpened, obsess over your messaging, obsess over your presentation, do significant rehearsal. You got to find time to do it. Spend time identifying those strengths that you want to keep emphasizing over and over, and anticipating any concerns a potential investor will have and how you're going to address them, so that when the question comes up, you're not surprised, you've got a crisp answer to it. And what's going to come out of this is a better and more defendable plan than you had before. Okay, I'm going to skip through the next couple. Talked about focus. Plan is pretty simple. Now that you know your overall direction, build out your goals for the next year at the department and the individual level. Break them out by quarter. Common theme with me, if you hear one thing, hear that. Quarterly emphasis matters, working toward a long-term objective. Identify, depending on which stage you are as a company, where you are with customer acquisition, et cetera, identify some cross-functional improvement projects, and then drive it all from action plans that can tell if you're that focuses your direction and can tell if you're being successful or not. Action plans have several rules that I follow. I've got one that, showing my age here, it's Excel based, that has served me well over the years. I'll be glad to share it with any of you. I'll eventually have something you can download in electronic format from my website. But always have the buy-in of the executive team. Have somebody who clearly owns that plan, who wakes up every morning thinking about making it successful. Clearly defined tasks and regular reporting. You're going to hear me talk about communication and meetings again later, but regular reporting that spurs discussion and course corrections. And when you get down into doing cross-functional improvements, there's one book. I'm going to give you 4 or 5 resources if you want to go back and do some reading. One of them is this one, The 4 Disciplines of Execution, mainly by Sean Covey, written with a couple of guys from Harvard. And I'll give you just a couple of their concepts. I don't want to spend much time here. Each of us are going to get caught up in what they call the whirlwind, but that's the day-to-day job responsibilities we have, which sucks up 80% of our time. What you want to do with everybody in your organization, everybody you work with, is focus that other 20% of the time like a laser, almost like a laser you're using on the sun to light a fire, so that it's most effective. So you develop a task force type project that needs improving, get a team together to do it. They meet weekly for 30 minutes. They have a real cadence of accountability with goals and action and focused items. And the ideal is you make the improvement, then it becomes part of the ongoing culture, and then you move on to the next project. And nobody, and I mean nobody, I'll say it again, nobody should ever be working on more than 2 of these type projects at once. What happens if you're trying to do too many big things, and that 20% of your time you have available, you don't know which one to work on, so nothing gets finished. So score, I'll go through this one quickly too. I think scoring is the backbone of progress. Most companies I see don't hit a home run here. What I like to see is weekly and then a more in-depth monthly report out of key performance indicators or metrics around the company, with a heavy emphasis on the goals that you're working toward, and an emphasis not just on reporting history that's already happened, but also projecting how are you going to be doing based on the facts in front of you at hitting your goals for that quarter. And if you talk to people who worked with me, in particular at my physician clinics years ago, it got to be a running joke, because my favorite philosophy is, in God we trust, everybody else bring data. And I've seen time and time again people trying to make decisions from guesswork. Bring the data. Process is really just how you go about doing things. All of your systems, such as customer implementation, how you go about selling, your customer support, are examples. But 2 critical ones as companies get out of the ground and start growing are your data collection, so that you can drive your metrics, so that you can drive your client engagement, so that you can tell how you're doing with customers, et cetera. And the other one is meetings. And I'll talk just briefly about meetings, and then we'll move on. This first item here is probably maybe the single biggest improvement for me of anything I ever did around meetings, and that's get the information out ahead of time. How many times have you been in a meeting and you spend 3/4 of the time just getting everybody caught up to speed on what's going on, and then you're almost out of energy and almost out of time when you're just now starting to talk about, okay, what do we do about it? If you get the information out ahead of time, people have time to read it, they come in knowing what's going on, and then you can have a short, focused meeting, and all the energy is around what do we do with the information, not what is the information. Established facilitator, clear agenda and timelines, and I say that are largely adhered to. I see a lot of people who rigidly say, if that meeting is set for 45 minutes, we're leaving after 45 minutes. That's usually true, but I don't obsessively adhere to that. If you're in a meeting, you've got the right people in the room, and you're really engaged on a really important item driving things forward. If you're going to go over a little bit, but it's productive, I'd say keep going. Clear follow-up, and the summary gets sent out within 24 hours, and make sure that any follow-up items are addressed in the future. those last three, Rob Trumbull, a gentleman who was my COO at my last company, is the best I've ever seen at doing that. I know when he leads a meeting, before he goes home that night, there'll be a synopsis sent out reminding everybody what they committed to and what the next steps are. And I know starting a few days before the next meeting, you'll start getting emails from him wanting an update on the action items you committed to. So he's pulling together the synopsis to send out ahead of the next meeting. Communicate. This is another area that in the busy day-to-day we have of our work that slips up on us all the time and can become crisis mode. I'm going to give you a really good example of that. Identify all your stakeholders. And this could be if you're working in a company now while you're incubating something on the side even. Who do you need to regularly communicate with? It could be employees broken down by subgroups, locations, departments, management tiers. It could be customers, investors, your bank, your board, your prospective investors that you want to keep updated, whoever it is. Plan out your engagement cadence with each of them. Schedule it. And then here's the big piece. Schedule the preparation and review time so that you're getting things to them timely, and then when you go in and speak, it's summarized and it's crisp. I'm on several boards, and one of them, we always have our board meetings it's in another state. It's usually at 9 a.m. on a Monday or Tuesday. And almost without fail, we get the board package at 2:30 the night before. Now that's gotten better recently, but it really affects the board meetings because we're walking in the room trying to struggle to read through everything. The team's tired, and it's just not the way to do it. Culture. Want to drill into this a little bit because I talked about hiring here, but I'm not going to go over all the things. 4 elements to that. Identifying your core values, which I think is more important than your core purpose. Hiring best practice, which is one I will talk about a little bit. Get intentional about culture. We all say that we want a great culture. We all think we know what culture is, but if you ask 10 people to define culture, you may get 10 answers. So get very intentional on what culture you're trying to incubate your company and how you're going to make sure that sticks. And then structured employee development. You can do employment development on a nickel and really give meaningful help to people. So when I talk about core values, again, I think this is an area that can be overcomplicated. Pull your management team together, pull your key team together, pull key people. Let everyone list their 3 to 5 most important values that they have that matters to them no matter what. Group them together in similar categories, paying special attention to which ones get more votes and what matters to the leader, the CEO, the man or woman who is the most important person in the company. And then from there, narrow it down to 4 to 6 with 6 absolute maximum. I think generally that little exercise in grouping will almost get you there. And then step back and talk about, are we really operating that way? Is that really how I go about doing business? And if it's not, talk about why. And that's the easy part. Where the rubber hits the road is making sure it sticks. You want to publish your values regularly and often and visibly. Regularly and often is the same word. Incorporate them to employee recognition. Incorporate them into your meetings. Make sure they're in the performance reviews once you get to that stage, but use them as a guiding force in hiring or finding people you want to partner with. And have the courage to walk away from someone that has all the skills but doesn't share your values. The biggest mistake I've ever made was in a company I worked with when I hired a key senior executive who had all the skills, but my gut was screaming at me the whole time that his or her values and the way they went about operating weren't a bad person, but the way they went about operating was not going to fit with the company I was at. My gut was screaming at me. I made the hire anyway, and I waited too long to make a change, and it really hurt us. So I'm going to step back for a minute, talk about hiring, then I'm going to go back to one other thing about culture in an organization. There's a book called Top Grading by Brad and Jeff Smart. It's really the the hiring and employee evaluation process that came out of GE, but it is one of the best resources I've ever used. And it's a hard read. They write very academic, but man, it's good. A few key points they had is hire from a job scorecard, not a job description. It's basically saying go more detailed in what you're looking to do there. Conduct screening interviews to narrow it down. And when you do the formal top grading interview, have it done by 2 people. Start with high school and walk sequentially all the way through the rest of somebody's career. And as I mentioned earlier, pay attention to your gut. Now, top grading interview, that could sound a little weird or hokey, but I'm telling you, it flows naturally and it works. You see trends when you really talk about people over time. And the best indicator of future performance is past performance. Now, don't rigidly follow that. Somebody at the age of 23 or 24 may not have optimized on a job, but as they grow and mature, things get better. So use a little grace there, but it is a good indicator. And let me give you an example about what I mean by a job scorecard. You're really looking at core competencies that you're needing to hire, not just duties somebody would do, that if they don't have these competencies, they're not going to be able to execute on these duties or these goals. And so we were, I'll use Entrada. We were an app that integrated tightly with electronic health records in the flow of seeing a patient through a clinic and working with the doctor. So we naturally thought, hey, hiring people who know electronic health records would make a lot of sense. So we went out and hired 3 people with vast experience selling electronic health record systems. All 3 of them flamed out. So we dug deeper. I said, why was that? And well, when you're selling a big project like an electronic health record into an organization, it's usually driven from a request for proposal or a formal process. You're almost more of as a salesperson, you're more of a project manager, where you're bringing in your demo experts, you're bringing in your negotiating team, et cetera. And in our case, we were selling a consultative workflow product that had to fit into their day-to-day operations. It was 2 totally different sales. And once we figured that out, we shifted the kind of people we were hiring. So, all right, I talked about intentional development of culture. Pick some champions there, be consistent, develop traditions. I'll stick with the trial example here. I'll give you 2. That's a picture of the golden donkey, a stupid piñata from Party City that we put duct tape around and painted gold, became the company mascot. Everybody who would get the employee of the month would be presented the golden donkey. We wanted to treat it like Lord Stanley's Cup. So next thing I know, there's a YouTube channel, a Facebook page, all kinds of photo albums and stories going out. There's pictures everywhere. We got clients and partners asking us to bring it into meetings with them. We're trying to figure out how to get the dang thing on a plane. But then as a way to really cement the culture and our core values, what we would do every month, whoever, or every other month, depending on how often we met, whoever was the owner of the golden donkey during that time had to kick off that part of the meeting by telling about the tales of the donkey, and they would give stories about what it did and what had happened during that time frame. And then they would be the one to present it to the next recipient. And during that presentation and explaining why this person is going to be bestowed the donkey, they would list at least 2 of our core values with specific examples that they had exhibited. Another one we did a product release every 4 to 6 months. And we would started naming after bands. We started alphabetically and worked through the alphabet, and we've come up with a band. I think we were on Journey when we sold the company. And we would take an album from that band, mount it on the wall with a list of all the key elements of that, designs of that product release in it, and we would celebrate it in front of the whole company after the release was done. It's like our music row with our gold records up. And that was just a incredible experience to see that play out and let everybody feel more engaged with the company. The last one I say here is celebrate successes. That's not something I naturally do. I'm pretty laid back to work with, so people like me from that perspective, but I'm very improvement oriented. So whenever I have something happen, I tend to just check that off mentally and move on to the next thing I got to get done. That's very important when you're at the early stage trying to scratch and claw a company up. You got to celebrate every one of those little successes, or the stress can wear you down. Here, this book here by Chip and Dan Heath called The Power of Moments. It's a quick read. It's fascinating. I would really recommend that to you. One thing that we did is we start every meeting, and I encourage you to do this. I do this with every company I work with. Start every meeting with just a minute or two of celebrating a few successes, things that have gone right in the last X amount of time. But then when you get to power moments, they really talk about if you can nail beginnings, endings, and transitions, the perception of you or your company can go through the roof. Disney and Southwest do it best. Disney's going to nail when you come in that park, and they're going to nail when you leave that park. And what's some examples? Day one of a new hire, the first week of customers live, people's birthdays or anniversaries or life events, customer anniversaries. There's stuff all over the place you can celebrate all the time when you start looking for it. Okay, moving on to mindset, because I want to drill into this a little bit, in particular how it relates to fundraising. What I define with mindset is overcoming your self-limiting beliefs to achieve breakthrough success. As you evolve as a person, as organizations grow and evolve, as your business plan grows and evolve, whatever it is, it's common that your perception of things remains stuck back a ways in the past. And you can almost be apologetic. You can go into a meeting thinking, I don't really belong here. And I don't want that mental game to hold you back. My kryptonite, you know, I've made jokes about growing up in Kentucky, but I did grow up in a fairly small town in western Kentucky, and a lot of aunts and uncles and cousins. But until myself and my cousins Donna and Linda went to college, nobody in our whole family had ever set foot on a college campus. When I moved to Nashville, I think I had $40 in my pocket. So my kryptonite, my challenge for a long, long time was a lack of confidence and belief in myself. And that framed what I did. Things were going well, I almost didn't think I deserved it. Things weren't going well, I beat myself up too much. Luckily, I have one thing that has always balanced me out, and that I would encourage all of y'all to keep this definition of this word handy as you fight through the trenches, and it's perseverance. No matter what, never give up and never keep moving forward. We're dealing with that right now. This COVID-19 crisis has shut down so many people's businesses. It's shut down growth and moving forward. We're all stuck in place in a lot of ways. Even while that's going on there's always things you can be doing to prepare to come out stronger on the other side. Give you an example about that. I'll use a contrast with two of the boards I'm on, both of them healthcare IT in this case. One of them, both of them had their new customer acquisition grind way down. One of them is just basically doing contingency budgets, figuring out how this is going to affect cash, and just realize they're just going to have to wait it out for a while. All I heard was, hopefully things will pick up later. The other one has got 14 initiatives in the works, has reached out to every client they have, has offered free resources that will help with COVID-19 screening, and has gotten multiple clients that's agreeing to take advantage of some free services they're offering to expand with them. And when they come out of this thing, their revenue is going to just skyrocket. So find a way through it, one step at a time, and always persevere. John D. Rockefeller, who in his time was the richest person in the world, said it best: I do not think there is any other quality so essential to success of any kind as the quality of perseverance. It overcomes almost everything, even nature. So here are 3 resources if you're someone who likes to study and read. Dr. Martin Seligman, who's at the University of Pennsylvania, he founded the positive psychology movement. His first book was Learned Optimism. He's got some incredible books, and he basically focused on how we process and react to negative or positive events in our life, but mainly negative. How do you deal with when something rough happens to you? And some cognitive tools and better processing things so that you can move forward and be a more optimistic person. Elite Minds is a book by Dr. Stan Beecham, who started off as the team sports psychologist for all the University of Georgia and several other university athletic teams. And he branched that out into working with business professionals. And he drives really hard into the mental side of performance and preparation. It's a really good read. It's a fairly quick read too. Third one is Peak Performance. This one's really interesting. Brad Stolberg, who was a former elite management consultant, and Steve Magnus, who was a former elite runner. I mean, a 4-minute marathoner almost. 4-minute miler. They did this book together, and it really focuses on common principles that drive performance in anything you do, and really drives hard into stress and what's the good and the bad of stress and how you can properly use stress to fuel you moving forward. How does mindset relate to fundraising? Well, quite simple. You can have a great plan. You can have a clear product that meets a need. You can have a clear customer base that could be big and an addressable market that could make your company very large. But ultimately, what investors react to and what they invest in are confidence and passion. If you don't have that, it's going to be hard to get them over the finish line. If you do have it, it can pull people along with you. Getting your focus, like we talked about earlier, much more nailed down so you feel confident in the plan you're presenting, and getting your mindset in the right place so that you're passionate and you're confident and you're poised when you make your presentations is going to dramatically increase your likelihood you're going to land money. All right, so conclude it, then I'll turn it back over to Haley. The playbook focus is defining your core purpose, your competitive niche, and your key overall strategic goals. Plan is then identifying at department individual level how you're going to work from those. Score is keeping score, driving speed and improved decision making through your data. Process is how you execute. Communicate is just your cadence of meaningful engagement with everybody that matters to you, internal and external. Culture, identify your core values and build an intentional culture that both attracts and retains the right people. And mindset is getting your mind in the right place to break through and have breakthrough success. So a couple of key summary things. I didn't talk about the first one really, but when I'm clicking at my best and when things are going my best is when I'm spending personal planning time. So we can get caught up when we're growing something or running something. It's almost like playing whack-a-mole, you know, the old game where something pops up and once you knock it down, something pops up somewhere else and you feel like you spend the whole time just bouncing from one big challenge to another. Being able to pull back from that and really think ahead can make all the difference. Where I wish I'd have done differently that I didn't do in the past, I wish I'd have had a coach or a peer group that forced me to get away from things and talk about my big challenges and get kind of above the fray on a more regular basis. I think it could have led to making some decisions quicker. And that's a key thing that happens for all of us. Every one of us can think of an instance when we knew something we needed to do, a lot of times personnel related, and we took 9 months to a year to finally take action on it. It's easy to procrastinate. Things get up that distract you, and just time can go by. As I mentioned early, 2 and 3 go together. Invest in marketing early and nail down your rocket ship. Your core product and audience is going to let you leap out of Earth's gravity and build your foundation. And finally, spend time focusing on your presence, your poise, how you're coming across, that confidence and that passion that matters so much. All right. Well, that brings us to the end. You know, the playbook's on my website. You can pull it down from the homepage, or I'll be glad, if you want to email me, I'll be glad to send it to you. You can reach out to us with questions, and I'll turn it back over to Haley to see how we want to wrap this thing up.
Sure. I think Rashad had a question. Rashad, would you want to unmute yourself?
Yes. Hey, Bill, that was a great talk.
Hey,
uh,
thanks.
yeah, early on you mentioned a company should have, I guess, three primary goals. One of which was revenue, I believe, and like your quarterly goals should align with some of those. I missed the other two, other than revenue. I think
Yeah,
I saw
so I
partnerships,
said,
maybe.
and generally as you grow your company, your overall big strategic goals should incorporate revenue growth. It should incorporate customer and partner diversification. Like I know one company I work with that one organization is 60% of their total revenue, and when they eventually get ready to sell their company, that's going to be a big issue, because if that client goes away, bad things happen. So revenue growth or customer acquisition, customer diversification, and the third one is building out your product or service line. In my case, the last company I ran, it was my product. When I ran physician practices and some other things, it was more the service offerings we had.
There's a few comments about some of the books and resources you recommended. Do you want to just quickly run through those again, Bill, and list them out so folks know?
Yeah. One thing we may need to do, send them out at the end. I'll flip back. I had three of them right here. Peak Performance is a great read. It's a fairly quick read too. And I used that, started off for my running, but then it has more applications in the business. And Leap Minds rather, is the book by Dr. Beecham that really talks about the mental side of both preparing and actually doing performance. It's another really easy read. And anything Dr. Martin Seligman has done, Learned Optimism was his first big breakthrough book. I just love it. It's a quick read too. The Power of Moments was the book about creating a celebration culture and being able to really hit on the best nerve with your customers and your clients. So again, that's called The Power of Moments by Stan Heath. And Top Grading was the fifth one I mentioned. And that is by Brad and Jeff Smart. And that is a platform around hiring best practices that I'm going to tell you, our hit rate on bringing in A players that we didn't have to terminate and restart on went out the roof when we adopted this. Because you struggle to have time to hire somebody when you're real busy doing your day-to-day. So if you're struggling to have time to hire them, it's going to be more tougher when you have to let them go and hire that position a second time. So those are the five I mentioned. I've got several others, but those are the ones I had in the presentation.
Okay, everyone go buy those, or one person buy them on Amazon and then read them really quickly so we can add them to the EC library once we all get back, right? All right, anyone else have a question? Otherwise, I have some. I want to keep it open. Anything in the chat? Rashad's raising his hand again. Did I see you raise your hand, Rashad?
I did.
Perfect.
I'm curious, right now, my product is in beta, building a social media app for sports called Bowie. And one of the things I need to focus on is developing a structure for my business operations. I guess one, sales, marketing, and I guess just overall just daily operations. Like, are there any tools that you use, like formal systems that you have in place to structure your business? I know some people, whether it's, I don't know, using HubSpot, it could be Agile, I don't know, any tools and systems?
From I'm laughing because from a product development side, if you've got a product centric tool, you'll talk to 100 organizations and all 100 of them say they practice agile development, and it may mean something different to everyone. So I'm not a programmer, even though I've heavily worked with IT companies, but I can say that I like to drive everything from from the end user experience backwards. And I believe spending some extra time on that brand promise we talked about and figuring out who your real target audience is going to be that you can really hit your first big lick with. And from that, work backwards to say, how do I have to have the product? What does my product need to look like to be easy to use and hit and connect with those people the best is a good way to start. Systems like how you implement a client, things like that, you can develop all those over time as you start, because you said you're in beta now, as you start rolling it out. I always recommend, like the very first thing I did when I came in Entrada, the very first thing I did with all my physician practices I ran and what I typically do with companies I work with is back what I mentioned on one of the 4 takeaways a few minutes ago. I spend some time very early on marketing. And once you figure out how you're going to go to market and how you can narrowly define things enough that you can really hit and resonate with people, then the rest of the stuff starts coming together from that. You've got it. The way you described your product, you've already got it focused down. A good start on that. So.
Awesome. Itzel, you had a question? I unmuted you.
Yeah, when you talked about perseverance, that really hit home. Like when you said the whole overcome your self-limited beliefs. Yeah. So right now it's been really hard for me to post online about my business. But I guess I just kind of want to hear more about the company that you talked about, how they were giving out freebies and stuff to their clients. Like that, how would that work? So then you just kind of like just keep that engagement, and then when they're ready to buy, you'll be the first one in their mind, or how would that work in a production?
So in this case, it was a company that has a base of $7 million of revenue. So they've already got a good client base, but their clients are physician clinics. And so with all the COVID stuff going on, all the clinics and hospitals have shut down elective things and are just kind of sitting on standby, waiting for the onrush of sick patients to come in. And so nobody was going to be expanding with them very aggressively right now. So we have some big goals for this year for growing the organization, and it was going to get them behind on revenue. So what they did, and this one specific example, they are actually a tool that patients enter their clinical. You know, when you go see the doctor, it's like the laptop you get to, or iPad rather, to fill in your clinical information before you go back. So they built a screener for COVID-19. They reached out to every patient they had and offered to give it to them free for 2 months, and have 50 clients pick up on it. One big health system in Texas added 150 new doctors to the platform just so they could have the tool. And then they started asking, what's your concerns now that the world's changing? And what they found out is now everybody's paranoid about people sharing an iPad. You know, patient number one clicks on the iPad to fill in their information, goes back to the exam room, then you give it to the next patient. You know, in today's germ phobia world that we're going to be in for a while. So they accelerated, in this one specific example, building out their mobile check-in, which means that when a patient comes in the clinic or before, they can do all that same information off their own personal smartphone. And that's opening up a bunch of new revenue opportunities. So I know that example, company with already $7 million of annual revenue, doesn't quite relate to where a lot of us are today, but it gives you examples of how they just stepped back and said, based on what's changing in my world and where I am with clients, rather than just sitting back and waiting it out and letting revenue drive, you know, letting us fall further and further behind, what could we be doing to shift our resources to focusing on building out the product more? You know, like your beta on the sports app, or what can I be doing to add new features that are going to be more applicable in this new world we found our way in? I hope that helps a little bit. But, yeah.
Awesome. Any other questions? All right, since we have Bill for 5 more minutes, I'll ask a question. Bill, I know that obviously you've had a lot of success. Kind of as CEO, what do you think is, I don't know, if you had to like dwindle it down to like a skill that you're always working on, or you thought really attributed to your success, what would that be, would you say?
I just keep coming back to perseverance. Gosh, when you start a company, take over a company, stick your neck out, you just committed to riding a roller coaster every hour. You're going to have weeks where you're flying high. You're going to have weeks where you're down in the trough. It's just an up and down roller coaster of emotions. And you just got to have the perseverance to ride it out. You always be focusing on the end game and just making sure no matter what's going on, you're just taking incremental steps. So like I know right now, I'm not going to pick up any new clients for the next month or two. And I've got 2 I'm working with, and one of them will phase out. So I know my revenue's going to be down next 2 or 3 months. So I'm just taking this time to just give away some time to people and work on my concepts even more, and just see when it comes out if I'm better prepared to help people more. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. All right, y'all. Anyone else want to unmute themselves? Otherwise, we'll wrap it up.
So,
Rob?
This is Chandra.
Oh, sorry, Chandra.
Yeah. Can you share the slides, Bill?
Yeah, we can. I'll work with Haley to get a PDF of them, and we'll make them available.
Yeah, sorry, I lost my connection here, so.
No worries. We can send those out after this to everyone who registered on Eventbrite.
Yeah.
I think you registered, Chandra.
Yeah,
so you should be good.
They did.
We're in a different world now, so I'm not used to working from my home exclusively like this.
Yeah.
Luckily, we did this on a Thursday, and that's the one day a week I shave. And so, but I'm down in my office is down in the basement. And Tuesday, when we had all those thunderstorms, Verizon's network got interrupted a little bit, and I was on like 7 calls that day, and nobody could hear me, and I kept having to run up to the 3rd floor and carry my laptop around to have meetings. And I thought, my God, if this is a permanent change, I'm going to go nuts. And luckily, it broke about 3 in the afternoon. But so things are going to drop. We're going to have times where our internet connectivity gets tighter, and it's tough when you're not leaving the house.
Yeah, and like all the non-essential employees from the hospital, they're asked to work from home now. So today is the starting day for everybody. So they just work from home.
Oh, wow. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Only the doctors and very essential nursing staff coming to the hospital.
Okay, I have one more question from Stu. What's behind you, Bill? And then we'll wrap up.
Behind me.
All the medals.
Are you talking about my medals? Oh.
Wow.
I'm 56. I started running half and full marathons when I was 40 just to stay in shape, and it gives me a way to experience cities I travel to a lot because I travel quite a bit. And so I was getting all these medals, and I would throw them in a drawer. And when we downsized a little bit and moved back into Nashville last April, I needed the drawer to store clothes, so I had to stick them somewhere. So I bought those and hung them on my wall. So
it's a great background for today. Well, we'll wrap things up.
Yeah.
Again, unfortunately, this is the hardest part about running these workshops is usually EC people are so good at clapping. Honestly, y'all kill it. Even when we have like a crowd of 8 people like really get into it. So we have to imagine a virtual applause, but thank you so much, Bill. And thank you everyone for coming. It was great to see your faces again. But I'll send those slides out. All right. Bye-bye, everybody.
Take care.
Yeah.
Bye. Thanks, Haley. Thanks, Bill.